The writer and philosopher Julia Kristeva once remarked that every text is like a mosaic of quotations. Now by this she didn't literally mean that every new writer must go cutting and pasting words, sentences, phrases from the works of earlier authors in order to create something new and meaningful, but rather that each new writer, and we can include Tolkien in this, must at one time have alluded to, referred to, consciously or unconsciously, to the words of those who've gone before. I've often thought that this was a concept easily translatable to the world of visual arts, by extension to the world of book illustration. So in this first episode, I'd like to concentrate on the work of a Ukrainian artist who exemplifies this approach. Now this individual was working in the last years of the communist period and found his very singular vision of Middle-earth on a veritable mosaic of historical and Tolkienian visual references. Now that artist's name is Sergei Ukhomov, and the illustration I'll be concentrating on today is on a visit to Tom Bombadil. On a Visit to Tom Bombadil portrays a moment from the climax of Book 1, Chapter 6 of The Fellowship of the Ring, The Old Forest. Here Tom Bombadil, having just released Merry and Pippin from the clutches of Old Man Willow, urges the four hobbits to follow him home. Ukhomov's illustration is one of 28 full-colour plates included in his Datil's 1993 two-volume edition of the Natalia Grigoreva and Vladimir Gruzhetsky Russian translation of The Lord of the Rings. It should be noted, however, that Ukhomov's illustration was created in 1987, a full 6 years before the publication of the Grigoreva and Gruzhetsky edition. Far more likely, therefore, that Ukhomov is basing the subject matter of his illustration on a description found in the book which provided his very first encounter with the works of Tolkien. This book was Andrei Kostyukovsky and Vladimir Muraveva's 1982 abridged translation of The Fellowship of the Ring, called Hranateli, which was published by Detskaya Literatura. Ukhomov's illustration depicts 5 figures together with their identifying inscriptions or labels. If we look from left to right, we have Arwen Benedar, Frodo, Pippin, Merry, spelt with an A instead of an E, and Sam. The name Arwen Benedar, of course, refers to the full Sindarin title for Tom Bombadil, and is loosely translated as oldest and fatherless. A 6th unidentified winged figure hovers directly above the hobbits, blowing a trumpet, the end of which is encircled by the letter R of Benedar. Ukumov's Bombadil has no lilies, unlike Tolkien's, and is clad in an ankle-length blue Byzantine-style robe fastened with a fibula brooch. This is different from the blue coat mentioned by Tolkien or the faded blue jacket mentioned by Grigoreva and Grzyecki. In fact, this garment more closely evokes the blue kaftan which is mentioned in Muraveva and Kistiakovsky's Hranitelli translation from 1982, which is the first one which Ukumov ever encountered. The inclusion of the 8-armed cross design emblazoned on the Bombadil's cloak is an interesting addition, as it bears a resemblance to similar designs found elsewhere in his corpus of Middle-earth illustrations. The design itself results from a melding of two distinct visual borrowings. Firstly, he takes the 8-armed cross and solar symbol of late antique Christian visual culture, examples of which we can see here from San Vitale in Ravenna and from Hagia Sophia, and he melds those with aspects of Tolkien's own Noldorin and Dwarven heraldry in order to create a new symbol for light. And this is the light of both the free peoples of Middle-earth, as we can see with Bombadil, but also light as an expression of the power of Sauron. A similar function can be attributed to the halo. Here Ukumov takes the flat, burnished gold halo common to medieval art and uses it as a means of delineating what he calls Tolkien's hierarchy of light and dark powers. Therefore, individuals like Bombadil and Gandalf will be seen with halos, but also Sauron and the Witch King. Bombadil's physical stance indicates that he's climbing the incline near the short waterfall at the edge of the old forest, although here temporal and spatial elements have been altered, and the hobbits are actually pictured approaching this point with Bombadil still in view. Bombadil wears no yellow boots, only sandals, and at his feet snakes the Withywindle River, complete with fish and crayfish, and above and to his left looms a tree, its twisting bough, overhanging branch and waterside location suggestive of Old Man Willow. This image exemplifies Ukumov's mosaic-like approach to the construction of his Tolkien illustrations, and it's clear on examination that a number of historical visual references have been integrated into the composition. If we begin by taking a look at the figure of Bombadil himself, the distinctive pose with the hands raised, looking back over the shoulder, echoes medieval manuscript depictions of Moses, for example this one from Folio 25V of the 9th century Moutier-Granvelle Bible. The miniature in question here depicts Moses on top of Mount Sinai, reaching upwards to accept the Ten Commandments from God's hand. In Ukumov's image, this prototype figure has been reversed to correspond with the right to left progression. However, the salient features remain, down to the distinctive sandals worn by both Moses and Bombadil. In addition, 3 of the hobbits, excluding Merry, appear to directly correspond to figures featured in the miniature Joshua, Moses, Aaron and the Israelites, which accompanies the Moses image on the same page of the Moutier-Granvelle Bible. As we can see, Aaron, shorn of his beard, rod and other accoutrements, clearly equates to Frodo, the Israelite directly behind Aaron to Pippin, and the Israelite with his right hand at his chin to Sam. Now if we move our attention to the subject of the winged figure hovering above the hobbits, its incongruous appearance alone possibly marks it out as a visual borrowing of some sort. Fortunately, the source of this prototype is quite clear. The figure almost certainly is taken from the evangelist symbol featured in Folio 25B St Matthew of the 7th century illuminated manuscript, the Lindisfarne Gospels. There are some slight differences between the two images. As we can see, Ukumov's figure has no book, for instance. However, the closeness of their linear designs is undeniable. The calligraphic elements and on a visit to Tom Bombadil also contribute to the mosaic composition, possessing direct prototypes again derived from the Lindisfarne Gospels. For example, the inscription Arwain Benedar employs the elaborate insular half-uncial script seen in these decorated initial pages. The words or Bombadil, together with the hobbits' names, are rendered in an unadorned version of the same script, but it seems to float in space, more akin to Aldridge's Old English interlinear gloss, which is featured in the Lindisfarne Gospels. So all of this begs the question, is there some kind of hidden meaning, some intertextual implication which is to be discerned amidst this mosaic of visual prototypes? Well, there appears to be no direct iconographical link between the borrowed motifs from the Moutier-Granvelle Bible, Moses, Aaron, etc., as they appear in Ukumov's image, and the actual biblical text to which they originally referred to, Exodus. Ukumov is not referencing Exodus directly. However, the visual motif of Moses and the Israelites has been employed in this illustration to construct a new iconographical motif which, while referencing Bombadil and the hobbits in The Lord of the Rings, also has the strength of that original biblical iconography within it. And this continues to be detectable even after the borrowed motif has been recycled. And this gives rise to a possible blending of the two narratives. It's not to say that originally Tolkien himself would have intended any such conflation between Bombadil and Moses. We're simply exploring that possibility as it exists within the content of this particular illustration. But what about that mysterious winged figure? Now, neither Tolkien, nor Grigoreva and Grozhetsky, or Muraveva or Kistiakovsky reference any such creature in their respective texts, and yet Ukhamov places it at the heart of his image. The key to this may reside not in the winged figure itself, but rather in the motif of the trumpet, an instrument which has its own connection with that Exodus story. We witness chapter 19 verses 16 to 17, where the voice of a trumpet exceeding loud incites Moses to lead his people out of their camp and up to the foot of Mount Sinai. The embodiment of this motif in visual form, i.e. this winged figure, facilitates a more thorough transfer of meaning from medieval prototype to new work. Bombadil, here functioning as Moses, can now respond to the divine trumpet call and lead the hobbits or the Israelites out of the old forest to the foot of the hill upon which his house is situated. From this basis, it's also perfectly possible to extrapolate the meaning to encompass the wider Exodus narrative, equating Bombadil's deliverance of the hobbits from the old forest to Moses, inspired by Yahweh, leading the Israelites out of Egypt.
This mosaic-like approach to the construction of images, which we've just seen with Sergei Ukhamov on a visit to Tom Bombadil, may not be without precedent in the canon of Tolkien illustration, but there can be very few incidences where the visual borrowing and the resultant layering of meaning are quite so complex. Until next time, goodbye.
This hay mead, this hay mead, every needs and of fire and fleets and candle lead, man doth receive thy soul from brigade dread when thou mayest pass every needs and all to mortal fire thou comes at last, man dost receive thy soul.